Even if he couldn't admit to murder, Bryant seemed to waver between denial and acceptance, at one point conceding that the evidence showed he had to have done it.
I can't fight it. It's obviously me.
After an intense 6-hour interrogation and with mounting evidence, Charles Bryant was finally charged with Jackie Vandagriff's murder. Christy Dixon could not believe the news.
That night, I actually was scared to go to sleep. I had nightmares. He had never threatened me before, but just the fact that someone that I felt that I knew had murdered someone, potentially, I was terrified.
For Caitlin Mathis, her worst fears were confirmed. And when she tried to learn more about the woman Bryant killed, she made a shocking discovery on Facebook.
I looked up Jackie Vandagriff and I realized, oh my God, I'm already friends with her.
Caitlin says that digital friendship began after Jackie's death.
You got a friend request from Jackie Vandagriff.
Yes.
Caitlin believes that Facebook friend request could only have come from one person, Charles Bryant.
That really sounds diabolical.
It was.
Bryant pleaded not guilty to Jackie's murder. His defense was the same story he told Ranger Holland.
These two young people met. They consumed a lot of alcohol. Our position is they had sex, kinky sex albeit, and she died.
Bryant's court-appointed defense attorney, Glynis McGinty, says Jackie Vandagriff's death was a tragic accident.
Are you telling me there's no evidence that Charles Bryant killed Jackie Vandagriff?
Not direct evidence.
Prosecutors Lucas Allen and Anna Hernandez believed the evidence they did have would be enough, but they also knew that most jurors want a motive, and they weren't sure they'd be able to tell this jury why they thought Jackie was targeted.
You have to wonder what is driving this person to do something like that.
In your minds, there is no doubt that the murder of Jackie Vandagriff is connected to the stalking of Caitlin Mathis.
Yes, I think we believe that, definitely. She might have just been victim number one, with Caitlin being victim number two.
To help prove this, the prosecution was hoping the judge would allow Caitlin to testify against her ex-boyfriend turned stalker in open court.
I felt sick.
What do you think was the most telling part of Charles Bryant's interview? Take a look at the evidence in the case against Bryant on Facebook at 48 Hours.
Jackie was the most special person. I know I'll never meet someone like her again.
In April 2018, a year and a half after Jackie Vandagriff's untimely death, Charles Bryant was standing trial for her murder. Her friend Jackie Tan could not bring herself to be there.
I wanted to go, but I'm going to be honest. I couldn't look at him.
Charles Bryant would have to answer for a long list of items the prosecution had collected, including that giant zip tie, the shovel he purchased the night Jackie died, and that large knife which police believe he used to cut up her body, all found at his house.
This is something that you pray every night does not happen to your child when they go off to school.
Investigators had also found a stun gun in his car with Jackie's DNA on it, but it appears Jackie was spared at least one horror. Prosecutors Anna Hernandez and Lucas Allen say the medical examiner was able to run tests on Jackie's remains and found no evidence of sexual assault.
There was zero evidence to support that they had any type of sexual encounter.
Prosecutors say this undermines Bryant's story that this was kinky sex gone wrong. His attorney, Glynis McGinty.
How could they have had sex if there's no evidence?
No evidence to the degree of no sperm found in her. That doesn't mean they didn't have some type of consensual sexual encounter.
She likes it when we're making out.
Prosecutors chose not to play that interrogation tape for the jury, which meant Bryant would have to take the stand if he wanted jurors to hear his version of events. He elected not to.
Shouldn't he be explaining to the jury why he's not at fault for her death?
And then that flies in the face of our constitutional rights.
But the defense knows it has an uphill battle to convince a jury that Bryant is not guilty of murder while admitting he disposed of Jackie's body.
If he says it was just an accident, why didn't he call for help?
Sure, fair question. Intoxicated, panicked, and his mind would not process all of that to make a rational decision that you or I would have made, call the police.
But Bryant went further than simply discarding Jackie's body. Much, much further. And prosecutors wanted the jury to hear their theory.
A huge piece of that story was the stalking.
But before the jury could hear from Caitlin, the judge would have to rule on whether or not to allow this evidence.
How is he his boyfriend?
Local TV cameras were there when, without the jury present, Caitlin took the stand and faced her ex.
I was disgusted just to see his face.
Did he look at you? Did you meet eyes?
At one point we had to, when they made me describe to the court what he was wearing. And he just had this smirk on his face.
There's nothing really that can prepare you for that, is there?
No. The second I walked out those doors, I started bawling.
In the end, the judge ruled against Caitlin being able to tell her story to the jury.
It was definitely a real blow to us.
That was the right decision.
Why?
He had not been convicted of anything with Caitlin.
As the jury went out to deliberate, the defense was hopeful.
I don't believe that they could prove that he murdered her. I don't think that they proved that.
But would the jury agree? They were out for a little over 2 hours, and even without hearing Caitlin's story,
We, the jury, find the defendant, Charles Bryant, Jr., guilty of the offense of murder.
Charles Bryant was found guilty of Jackie Vandagriff's murder and dismemberment.
To your way of thinking, was justice done?
Yes.
I knew she was up there and said, thank you.
Because prosecutors had no evidence Bryant committed another crime at the same time as Jackie's murder, like rape or kidnapping, he was not eligible for the death penalty. He was sentenced to life.
As terrible as it is to say, but I wanted the death penalty.
Under Texas law, Bryant could be eligible for parole after 30 years. Caitlin says she feels like she's still looking over her shoulder and always will be.
I fear that when he gets out, he'll come and find me and do something to either me or someone that I love. That's my biggest fear.
Ever since this happened, Caitlin and her mother have been thinking about Jackie and her family.
This whole time I wanted to reach out, but I didn't know how they felt.
Nearly 2 years after Jackie died, they finally met.
Her grandmother, bless her heart, she immediately came up to us and to Caitlin and hugged her and said, I've been so worried about you these past 2 years.
Wow. Karen, why is this the part that gets you?
He took away their little girl. And the pain I saw in their eyes, I could feel their pain.
And yet the grandmother was telling Caitlin she was worried about Caitlin.
Yes,
You sound like very special people.
they are.
Caitlin says she's struggled with the fact that she survived and Jackie did not.
It's just the guilt that eats me up sometimes. I would have easily taken her place if I had the chance.